So Steve Chu was born in Baltimore County, Maryland, and eventually settled in Montgomery County with his Taiwanese parents. Although his father is a chef, he discouraged Chu from following the same path. And as he studied economics at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Chu realized that his dream was to open his own restaurant. While volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, he met his future business partner, Ephraim Ababe, and in 2014, Yusiripa Ababe and Chu opened Ekibin, an Asian fusion fast casual stand in a farmer's market. In 2016, Ekibin moved into a brick and mortar space in the Fells Point neighborhood of Baltimore City, and this year they opened a second location in Hamden. Chu's goal with the cuisine of Ekibin is to create a safe space for anyone from any demographic to try something different. In Baltimore, a city deeply divided along economic and racial lines, Chu aims to make everyone feel welcome, one bun at a time. Creative Mornings Baltimore, please join me in welcoming Steve Chu to the virtual stage.
Hey everybody. Okay, does this mean I start? Sorry guys, that's my first time. I'd like to start off by sharing one of my most memorable restaurant experiences. I was 8 years old and my dad took me to this really fancy restaurant, and the interior is like really dimly lit, wood walls. There's a lot of energy, a lot of chatter, a ton of servers running back and forth. They're all in like really nicely pressed white shirts, black vests. And I'm just looking all around me, just really amazed at the environment that's all around me. And all of a sudden, a server drops off a Caesar salad, a baked potato the size of my head that's loaded with sour cream, butter, and chives. And finally, a massive prime rib. It was like 21 ounces. And this was like 1998, so portions were insane. And 21 ounces is like half the size of my 8-year-old body. And I'm just looking at all of this food in front of me. I'm kind of confused. I don't know where to begin. My dad just looks at me, he laughs, and he's like, yo, just go for the salad first. And like any 8-year-old would do, I don't really go for the salad. I don't go for the veggies. I just go for the croutons, right? So I pick up a crouton, put it in my mouth, and I realize it's not a crouton. It's actually crusty, like crispy little cornbread bits studded with fresh summer corn. So every bite that I take, there's like a fresh, summery, sweet goodness in my mouth, and I lose my mind. And that was the day that I fell in love with restaurants. And ever since then, I was hooked. I was on this search for that same experience that I had at that prime rib restaurant, but with other cuisines. So what does someone do in 1998? They go on AskJeeves.com. And for those that don't know what AskJeeves.com is, one, I'm very jealous of you because you're not that old. Two, if you do know what AskJeeves.com is, you're old like me. So AskJeeves.com is actually the precursor. It was a search engine before Google. So this was like the pre-Google era. Like it is that ancient. And so I would type on Ask Jeeves, like, hey, where is the best restaurant in Maryland? And a bunch of articles would pop up. And as an 8-year-old, I'm not really trying to read through all these articles. So the mode of advertising that appealed to me was TV commercials. And I'd watch a lot of TV. And there's this one restaurant in particular that would have a commercial on every commercial break for hours on end. And this restaurant, Joe's Pizza and Pasta, and they would always advertise their unlimited salad, breadsticks, and pasta. And they look so good. I was like, this restaurant has got to be it. It's gonna make my dreams come true. And I went up to my dad, like, hey dad, can we go to Joe's Pizza and Pasta? And he's like looking at me like, you're 8 years old. Why are you asking me to go to this restaurant? He's like, where did you hear about this place? It's like, oh, I heard about it on TV. It's like, okay, well, was it like a TV show? I was like, no, it was like a commercial. And he looks at me, he's like, oh, hell no, kid. We're not going to this place. There's no good restaurant on earth that needs to run a TV commercial. I'm like, Dad, you don't get it. It's great. Unlimited salad, breadsticks, and pasta. He's like, no, we're not going. And so the next week, we're standing outside of Joe's Pizza and Pasta. And it's in this like old, crusty, dusty ass renovated Taco Bell. It's not even that renovated. Like the stucco is still there. The last Alamo style windows are there. We go inside. It smells like stale, dusty bleach, if that's a smell. And we're looking around. There's no one to greet us, no host, no server. So we just sit down and we find a table that still has those like fast food swivel chairs that like don't move. And eventually my dad waves down somebody and they come to the table like, what do you want? And my dad's a chef and a restaurateur. He's been in the business since he was 14. And he's just kind of taken aback like, we would like menus, please. And the guy comes back, drops off 2 menus, hovers over us, and without skipping a beat, just goes, all right, now what do you want? And my dad's like holding it in. He's like visibly like kind of pissed. He's like, well, I've never been here before, so what's good? And the server's like, I don't know. I don't eat here. And my dad looks at me and he goes, yo, I don't want anything here. This place sucks. This guy sucks. And I'm like, Dad, like he actually said that in front of the server and the server didn't flinch. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to convince you that this place is great. So I order some of the unlimited pasta. I get crab Alfredo with angel hair pasta and a pizza. The pizza comes, it's like normal pizza, thin crust, whatever. My dad got anchovies on it, so it was like extra salty. And then the unlimited pasta came. And when this thing arrived, it came in like a 4-pound porcelain bowl. And it looked like the dude that was cooking the pasta didn't want to cook more unlimited pasta for us. So he just cooked all the unlimited pasta at one time, threw it in a bowl, and gave it to us. And there's so much food. My dad was like, what the hell is this? And we were both just shocked. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. I looked terrible, but I was like, oh, I was convinced it was great. And so I'm attempting to split up this bowl of pasta for the 2 of us. I stick my fork in it, and I pick my fork up, and the whole bowl of pasta is congealed, and I'm lifting the whole thing up with my fork. And needless to say, it was a terrible restaurant experience. The food sucked. It was $34. I still remember that to this day because that's all he said. He was like, it's $34. I spent $34 on this, blah, 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 blah. You're never picking the restaurant ever again. This is awful. And so the following week, I picked the restaurant, and the next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, until finally he just like gave up. He was like, dude, please stop. Like, I work 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. This is my only day off. I don't want to eat trash with you. Please, 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 please. So that's when I realized that a lot of restaurants are actually really, really bad. And I was surprised at how bad so many were. And a lot of them are just like machines that are designed to take your money and feed you these lies. Like, oh, we have the best crab cakes here, blah, 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 blah. And you eat it and you're like, wow, this is out of a can. This is gross. But the really great restaurants, the few that are really amazing, are actually representations of the restaurateurs themselves. And you can really taste the heart and soul that they put into the food. So we're going to go into our first example of a restaurant that does that. So this is Cocina Luchadoras. It's this little tiny, probably like 700 square foot Mexican restaurant located in Upper Fells Point. And as you can see, it is bright, loud, bold, and it's very homey. It's super cozy, and everyone there is super hospitable. And the next slide. This is Rosalind. She's owner of Cocina Luchadoras, and she's also very bright, very loud, very bold, and also just super hospitable. She's so nice every time I go in. She makes me feel like I'm in her home. I'm in her living room. And the food that they serve in Cocina Luchadoras is the food of her childhood. And the best part about the restaurant is, she doesn't really care about what she sells. She just kind of sells what she wants. And this picture right here is one of my favorite dishes of all time, and especially when it's made by them. It's called menudo, and it's a soup that consists of a really rich broth, red chili paste, and various parts of the cow's stomach. Cows have 4 stomachs, so you've got a little bit of tripe, a little bit of everything in there. And as you can see, there's some like black pepper, onions, lime, chilies, things to season your soup with. When this soup is done right, it's like the best thing ever. It's super warming. It's just the ultimate comfort food. There are some tortillas that are served on the side too. This thing's freaking great. But when it's awful, it's like gamey, it's rank, it stinks. It's like, it's terrible. And most of the restaurants that sell menudo sell the bad menudo. But fortunately, Cocina Luchadoras is 2 blocks away from me, and they have the best menudo on earth. And when I talked to Rosalind about it, I'm like, Rosalind, why do you sell menudo? It doesn't help really pay the rent. I mean, when you tell Americans, hey, let's get this cow stomach soup, it doesn't really stir anyone's appetite. And her answer is, yeah, I like it. I grew up eating it. I'm gonna sell it. Like, I'm gonna do me. It's like, all right, that's a great answer. And so this restaurant is a perfect example of someone putting their heart and soul into a restaurant, and it's a total reflection of who they are as a person. But not only is it about people's past experiences that shape their restaurants, but it's about their current experiences in their new environments. So this is like your typical styrofoam box using halal chicken and rice cart, halal chicken and rice. Like you got your chicken, you got your white sauce, there's rice underneath, you got your lettuce, all that jazz. And the styrofoam box being used in this item is really more than a symbol for pollution or unsustainability or backwards policy. Like to me, this styrofoam box is a symbol of the true immigrant hustle. Like this is the hustle of a street vendor who can't afford the cardboard or the biodegradable containers because they're 10 or 20 times the price of styrofoam. And that's because they don't believe that Americans will pay more for their food because they're not from America. So what they do is they're all alone in this halal cart that's probably 100 degrees. During Artscape, it's probably like 140 degrees in there. And they're just hustling chicken and rice boxes for $7 each. And that's including a drink. Like that is so cheap. And the last thing that they care about is how you really feel towards their styrofoam boxes. You know, they're trying to make a living. So why do people like that work so hard for so little reward? You know, why do they think it's okay for them to undervalue their work and themselves? And I think part of that reason is that there's a unintentional lack of visibility from the food media. So if you do like an analysis on who's in charge of all these food magazines, the average age of a food editor is like 51 years old. That's like half a century plus 1 year old. Like that's pretty old. And when they're young, like 20, 30 years ago, European, French, Italian cuisine, like that was all the rage. And that's been all the rage until recently. Like the past 5 years or so, the narrative has started to change. So it makes a lot of sense for our food landscape to be the way it is, why it's so skewed towards European cuisine. But being 50 years old, it's really hard to change at that age. Like you're kind of stuck in your ways. And the world and the culinary landscape is changing a lot faster than these articles or even their palates can adapt. So this is a picture of classic French dish. It's made out of really fresh raw beef. It's probably beef tenderloin. There's mustard, shallots, cornichons, which are like really, really fancy pickles, and a few pieces of toasted bread on the side. It's 29 bucks. And if your dinner partner really, really likes you, you could probably get a bite of their food. If not, then you're not gonna get to try their food. Now this is kitfo, and this is one of my favorite Ethiopian dishes, and I actually had the opportunity to try this when I was in college. Ephraim introduced this to me, and it's pretty much Ethiopian beef tartare, but seasoned with imported Ethiopian butter called kibe, a lot of spices, and there's like some cheese and vegetables in that bowl too. And I think the thing in the middle might be horseradish. And this dish goes for like $14 or $15 and serves 3 to 4 people. And it's the best damn beef tartare on the planet. And like the past picture, that beef tartare was like 29 bucks. And this dish right here, this is a perfectly cooked pan roasted cod with kale and butter beans. It's probably gonna run you 29 bucks. It's gonna serve one person. It's gonna be delicious. And this baby right here, this is something I grew up with, one of my all-time favorites. It's Cantonese steamed whole fish. It's in a ginger scallion sauce, and this whole fish will run you $29 as well. But you get the whole fish, probably feed like 4 people, and you get the whole damn fish. It's like 2 pounds. And so, like the question arises, why is the pricing gap so wide? And some people might say, you pay for the ambiance in the other restaurants, or that there's better service in these restaurants, so you're expected to pay more. There's more overhead. But nobody wants to build a shitty looking restaurant. I mean, if you're gonna spend 6 figures, so a few $1 million building out a space, you're not gonna put out like an ugly looking ambiance. You're going to try to build the hottest restaurant in your hometown, one of the restaurants that gave you that amazing food memory that you have. And when I was a kid, I would make these arguments. I'd go out to eat with my dad, and I'd be like, hey, why do Chinese restaurants have the worst service? Or why is it so like dingy in here? And my dad was just like, dude, this is the way service is in China. Like, this is how it is. This is how the restaurants look. Like, that's just kind of the way it is. And I'd be like, no way. Like, you don't know what you're talking about, old man. Like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you know what? One day you'll understand. One day you'll grow up and you'll travel and you'll see. And he was right. A few years ago, I had the privilege to go to Hong Kong, and I was waiting in line in this really, really popular breakfast spot. I waited in line for 30 minutes. And in Hong Kong, you pretty much get inside the restaurant. If you get a seat, they'll whisk you to the table. You'll sit in a round table with like 8 other people that you don't know. And the server will come up, like, what do you want? And you better know what you want, because you've been waiting in line for 30 minutes and no one's got time to wait for you to pour over that menu and ask questions. And so you tell them what you want, they write down your order, and then they'll give you your tab then and there. Like, they won't even wait for the food to arrive. It's like, I'm gonna give you your check, here you go. The food will arrive, you'll pay for it, and then like, you'll get out of here. And it makes sense for good service to be like that. In one of the most densely populated countries in the world, the mentality is, there's so many people here, we're gonna get you in, we're gonna get you out, and the person behind you who's also been waiting 30 minutes is going to be seated next, and we're gonna do the same thing for them too. So it's like a common courtesy for everybody to just serve people really, really, really fast. And so, like, not everybody has that opportunity or that privilege to travel across Asia or Europe to learn those lessons firsthand. But the best part is, living in America in a multicultural society, is we don't have to travel. We have all of these cultures here already. And if all Americans were really comfortable with our identity, like, I'm Taiwanese American. And I feel like oftentimes I have one foot in each like tub, so to speak. Half of my life would be like Steve, the American, and the other half would be Steve, the Chinese or Taiwanese kid. And whenever I'd hang out with my friends who weren't Chinese or Taiwanese, I would be like super Americanized. Like, yeah, let's go get some grilled cheese. And when I would hang out with like Taiwanese friends, I'm like, yeah, let's go get some beef noodle soup and eat some intestines, and hell yeah, it's gonna be fucking awesome. Screw grilled cheese. But like, if we're all really comfortable like our identities, you know, how many biases could we tear down just by introducing our friends and peers to the other side of ourselves? Like, wouldn't it be powerful if all Americans weren't afraid to walk into that weird Chinese restaurant with writings on the walls because they were like, oh, Steve took me here and we ate intestines and it was fucking great. My mom thought it was weird, but whatever. Like, we could really challenge the status quo, and we could really vote with our dollars to keep all of these diverse immigrant businesses alive. And other people would see their success and they would follow suit. And it would create a lot more variety in the marketplace, seeing the success of all these immigrant-run businesses. Like, Baltimore does not need another giant opening up next to Safeway, opening up next to fucking Harris Teeter. They all sell the same thing. Like, they got Campbell's soup and Bounty toilet paper and all of them. But what Baltimore needs is, we need another Asian grocery store. We need another Indian grocery store. We need another Ethiopian grocery store. It needs a lot more diversity. And Baltimore's a city that's 61% Black, 27% white, 5% Hispanic, 7% everything else. And out of that everything else, it's like, I'm probably like 2% of that everything else. And we're not convincing any like immigrant business owners to come into Baltimore City to serve to my 2% ass. Like, I'm not going to keep them alive. But if we can introduce all of our friends and help them to be more comfortable with these businesses so they're not afraid into walking into these different businesses because, you know, they've never been in one, because they're not Chinese, because everything's labeled in Chinese, everyone who works there is Chinese. If we just had our friends experience that prior, they would go there more often and experience it. And we should expose our friends to the foods so they're not weirded out by like braised pig's ears with kanji, and to familiarize them with textures so often off-putting to the American palate, but that are so near and dear to our hearts. Like, most of our friends that we show this other side to may never understand the food. But there will be like 2 or 3 of them that get it, and they'll fall in love with it, and they'll rave about it. It's going to change their lives. They will tell their parents about it. They will tell their friends about it, and it's going to snowball. More and more people will know about it, and it's going to change the trajectory of how they view things and how they share new cool things with everybody. And, you know, that's the amazing part about sharing and food, is that we're able to humanize each other through food. And the first part in bridging that gap of understanding between cultures is being able to be comfortable with that side of ourselves. So, like, I challenge everyone here, the next time you hang out with your friends, you should skip the happy hour. You don't need those $1 margaritas. And instead, you should invite your friends over to your house and call your mom or your grandma or about those old cookbooks and cook something from your heritage for them. And it might be awkward for an hour because you haven't cooked in forever. But I promise that once you sit down and start eating, you'll learn so much about each other just because you share the pierogies and kielbasa from your childhood, or your sinigang, or your Yemeni hanith, or Ghanaian spinach stew. And like, it's okay if you can't cook, because ultimately this isn't about the food. It's about sharing your experience and your identity with your friends.
Yay! Thanks, Steve. That was so great. I really loved it. Now it's time for Q&A. I'm also just conscious of time too, and want to be respectful of everybody's time, and knowing that Zoom is, you know, we're all hitting that Zoom fatigue too. But let's get in some Q&A, y'all. If you have questions, if you go to the participants view, if you're in Zoom, you'll see at the bottom, there's a little thing where you can click a green check mark. If you have a green check, if you want to ask a question live in the Zoom room, I want to encourage you to do that. If you aren't comfortable being on camera, go ahead and just write it in the chat. Or if you are on the Tweeter, tweet it there. We'd love to hear what some questions might be. But I can start. So Steve, As we mentioned earlier, we first talked about you doing this talk in December. And I know that the talk has kind of gone on a journey since then. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh man. So originally, like it was going to be a totally different talk. So I interviewed a lot of different chefs around the city to see how their identity bled and tied into their businesses. So I interviewed Carlos Raba from Clavel, Damien from Black Sauce, obviously Rosalind, and many others. And yeah, when you hit me up, like 2 weeks after like all the COVID and the protesting, you're like, you ready to talk? I was like, so yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, but it was a really fun challenge, and being able to talk about how we can really just humanize each other with our food, like that was pretty big. To share that other part of yourself is, yeah, that was a cool journey to go on.
Great. I see a question in the chat. Anand, do you want to unmute and ask live in the room?
Sure. Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for the talk, Steve. It was really beautiful. I love what you said about the changing of the old guard of the food editors, and how there's only certain voices being uplifted. Do you have any heroes of people that are uplifting, the hole in the wall, the immigrant restaurants that don't have the same sheen as a lot of magazines are looking for?
Yeah, I think they're all doing a really good job. Like Eater's done a big change. And the Baltimore Sun's doing an awesome job. Like Christina and John, they're doing a really good job with being more inclusive and not going to the typical restaurants you normally hear of.
Yeah. There is a question from the YouTubes. Steve, have you heard any whispers of an Asian supermarket coming to town? Because that would be amazing.
Nah, I wish though. I have to drive out to like Ellicott City or Dundalk or Potong.
I want to just kind of wrap up the Q&A. Sorry, y'all, that this hasn't been like as long as it normally is for the Q&A, but I do want to give you the opportunity and just like, is there anything going on with Ekuben right now? Kind of like tell us what's going on.
So we're doing like the Summer of Crab special. So every Wednesday, starting at 4:30, we'll release a new crab special. It's crab season. It's delicious. Great time to have crab. And if you guys have any more questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. Handles Stevie Chu. Or you can send us an email through Ekuben. Yeah, thanks for attending, everyone.